Okay, we're back. Thanks for your patience, everybody. Giselle, can you join us? Yeah, so greetings, everyone, and sorry for the glitch, everybody, and welcome. We'd like to welcome you to our first BCWI webinar, and we had a little technical glitch here, but it just goes along with the last year because, in the past year, we've all encountered tremendous turmoil. And today, we want to encourage you through this webinar to work towards a hopeful future. Our goal for this webinar is to provide you with actionable tools to steward your mission and talent as you take your organization through a recovery journey. This is the first of a four-part webinar series called Position Your Workplace Culture to Flourish. Many of you are already familiar with our weekly blogs and podcasts, and many of you are current ministry partners, and we really appreciate that. We're passionate about serving you. Welcome. Today, we'd like to have you participate. We're going to have 2 polls and then 2 Q&A sessions, and we'll also take your questions. So if you look at the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a chat room and where you can type in questions. And we're going to have Jay Bransford actually manage the question and answer session. So let's get started. And let me start with a prayer to get us started. Lord, we thank you for your presence today. We thank you for technology that we can even do this. So please help us as we shepherd the flock that you've entrusted with us, as we work with our employees in this next season of ministry. Guide us through these uncertain times for your glory. In Jesus' name, amen. And as Giselle has introduced herself, I'm Al Lopez. I'm the CEO and the co-founder of the Best Christian Workplace Institute. And I've worked with organizations like yours for 20 years. And after having many marketplace leadership roles, including a leadership role with a global human resource consulting firm. I live here in the Seattle area. What was that, 60 some degrees? Somebody said it was in Seattle. You must be on the other side of town. But and also my wife, Kathy, works here with us at BCWI. So one of the things that we're passionate about is our vision. And our vision since the very beginning has been that we believe that Christian workplaces should set the standard as the best, most effective places to work in the world. And we do that by equipping and inspiring Christian leaders to build a flourishing workplace. In fact, we've got a goal that we'd like to see 1,000 flourishing Christian-led workplaces in the year 2030. And that is a significant growth from where we are today. And we do that by providing engagement surveys to measure the health of your culture. We also provide leadership development 360s, culture consulting, and coaching. Our reach, as many of you know, spans several sectors from churches, Christian nonprofit organizations, and Christian-led for-profit companies. And our research has identified 8 drivers of employee engagement in Christian-led organizations. We know that healthy, even flourishing workplaces have greater impact and growth. We've developed a road to flourishing as we guide organizations on a journey of transformation. Our 3-phase model, Discover, Build, and Grow, has helped organizations move faster than ever to create a flourishing workplace. So again, we're really glad that each of you are here. And today, we're going to share several tools that we've designed to help you steward your mission and talents now that we're entering a new season. And spring is coming. The sun is shining in Seattle. We see it as a new season coming out of COVID, as well as other issues that we've experienced the last year. And after this webinar, we're going to invite you to participate and receive these toolkits as a gift for attending. You may have questions along the way. Please put them in the chat box, and we'll take time to answer as many as possible.
Well, thanks, Al. Let's go ahead and get started now. So first question you may ask yourself is, why this webinar? And at this point, you're probably going to prefer that I don't go through and read and give you a rundown of the things that you're seeing on the screen and the challenges you faced in 2020. And unfortunately, you're probably facing some of those challenges now that we're well into 2021. The strongest theme, obviously, has been COVID, and it does remain COVID. But we know from working with hundreds of organizations in 2020 that the landscape is actually quite a bit broader than just COVID, as you can see from there. So many of you have faced the challenges that you're seeing on the screen, and you still may be in the midst of them. Now, Al, tell us about how we lead well under these kind of challenges.
Well, thanks, Giselle. Indeed, the rapid changes and disruptions have created a combination of critical challenges for organizations. And for many of us, they include the things that we show here on the slide. We've had to make really urgent financial decisions, particularly perhaps last spring after COVID started and things really shut down. But we needed to make those decisions to keep our organization solvent. And even for survival, some of us had to make really strong and clear long-term mission and people decisions that are different from the path we had really planned. We've had to work to preserve our core strengths as organizations along the way. We've had to build and even rebuild employee engagement as we have had to make sacrifices, have our employees make sacrifices from downsizing, pay cuts, and freezes. And we've also begun to think about and rethink the future of work. What's it going to look like when we open back up here in the foreseeable future? And recovering from the downturn, most of us have faced, really some core decisions, seeing that we need to make strategic decisions in order to grow and to invest in the future. So these are some of the things that we've seen just in the past few months. So these challenges call for a careful yet rapid set of responses. And that's why we've positioned this webinar at this point, because now as we look to the future, what are some of the responses that we need to make? What are some of the decisions to really prepare us for the future? And we suggest a 4-step approach to meet these challenges. Simply stated, it's assess, align. Number 3 is care for people, and 4 is take action. Today we'll preview two toolkits, say that quickly, 2 toolkits that we've designed that guide you through these steps. In addition, we'll talk about the practical application of these tools for your situation. So these toolkits are designed to help meet you where you are in the cycle of change. So let's get a sense of what we're going to do today. Giselle, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So Al, if you want to go ahead and move forward to the poll, we're going to go ahead and involve you now in this poll, and we'll wait a second for Al to get it up. Yep. So here's the poll. We need to know, where are you today? Those of you that are attending, are you in a situation where A, you need to make major changes now? You've hung in there for a while, but now you're going to need to make some pretty tough decisions that are going to change the nature of your organization. Or are you B, are you in the midst of changes? You've changed already some, but you still need to make changes to really be strong and to recover. Then there's C. Those of you, you've made your major changes, you're looking to be more in the recovery mode. And then finally, are there people out there that are D? Did you do an easy pivot? Did you literally not have to make much changes at all? Did you just, jump in there and switch around and it was easier for you? So we like to know where you are. And we're gonna wait for a minute for you to answer. A is in the midst. A is need to make major changes. B is in the midst. C is we're already in recovery mode. And then finally, we've got the easy pivot. So
go ahead and put your responses in.
We don't really have any easy pivots yet. I kind of do want to meet those people.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Easy pivot. We haven't met any of them in our work, that's for sure.
Yeah, boy.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fascinating, the rapid growth and in the midst, where we've changed some, but still are amid major changes. And again, recovery mode is that we've made major cuts and are ready to, and that they're in recovery mode moving forward. Yeah, that's great.
All right. Well, it looks like we're up to 79%. BCWI is an institute, so we want statistical validity for our answers. So we got to 82. So now we feel like we have statistical validity. So looks like the predominance of the people attending are in the midst of making changes. Next, we have the recovery mode, and some have not yet had to make major changes. So, all right, let's move on, Al. Now that we know that most groups are falling in A and B. So tell us about the toolkit.
Yeah, well, thanks for your input, everybody. And now let's start with those of you who answered A and B, and B is clearly the winner. We've created a toolkit called Stewarding Talent and Mission Through Times of Disruption, and it's packed with a powerful and careful approach to critical decision making, especially when there's clearly urgency to stabilize finances, trim or cut programs, maybe even have layoffs, and possibly suspend certain key initiatives that we might have in our organizations. And the toolkit is intended to help you make these changes and to do it in a way that doesn't discourage your staff or hamper your ability to recover here in the next several months. You might ask, is it really possible to do some of these things and not disengage your staff? And the answer is yes. And we've worked with organizations this year, particularly that have made major and rapid decisions last spring and summer. And they're still able to have engaged staff if they do it right. And that's one of the purposes of this toolkit, is to help you do it right. So let's look at what some of the key steps are in doing this. And we're recommending a 4-step process. The steps are assess, align, care for people, and take action. We mentioned that earlier. Now let's take a look at step 1 of the toolkit, and keep in mind that you'll get a chance to request a free copy following the webinar. So Giselle, lead us through the first step.
Absolutely, Al. So the first step is assess. And this toolkit has a strong emphasis on assess, and you might want to know, why is that? Well, we feel that it's critical for leaders to avoid the temptation to cut, freeze, and act without doing assessments first in these 4 critical areas. In our own experience and experiences that we've had with partners like you, it tells us that leaders will often look for either quick or easy ways to change or reduce in a disruption or crisis. And it's been known and called low-hanging fruit. Look for that low-hanging fruit. And we think that those kind of decisions can have devastating effects on the people and the mission. We encourage you, instead of just looking around at what's easy now, to still your nerves and do an assessment across these 4 areas, not jumping in too quickly without the total picture or without input and participation from those that are going to be the key to your success. So the 4 areas are finances, disruptions, mission, and people. These are the 4 critical areas that you need to assess. And in this, you're going to look at your unique finances, your unique disruptions, your unique mission, and your people. So let's talk about what's in the toolkit. And we're going to start with this example that you're seeing in front of you. The toolkit guides you with best practice actions and then actually gives you action worksheets. And where does this come from? Well, I've had a lot of experience. I wish I hadn't in times of reorganization and times of cuts and budgets. Some of you are on this webinar and actually went through that together with me. And we know that you need to take this kind of approach to do a good job. And so we at BCWI have created the very tools that we've used as leaders to make these kinds of decisions. So this is an example of the financial analysis. It walks you through a series of exercises, and we provide you with a toolkit, the Excel files that you can use. So we've got a PDF we'll provide to you, but also the Excel files. And that way you'll be able to customize the kind of work that you need to do. The example you're seeing here is part of the finance section. It's looking at the immediate, the near term, and the more longer term horizon on finances and how they're impacted by whatever disruption. The way that we've designed the toolkit is that each of the analyzers stand alone. So if, for example, you've done a really great job of analyzing your financial horizon, then maybe you'll use the people analyzer or the disruption analyzer that we'll go through in a minute, or maybe just the questions and answers. So each of the various parts of the toolkit do stand alone, or that they can be used together. All right, Al, if you want to go on to the next slide. Let's talk about disruptions. So in area 2, after you've looked at your finances and gotten that near-term, mid-term, and more long-term view of where your finances are, you're going to look at your unique disruptions. You're going to go through this exercise to list the type and the extent of the disruption your organization has faced. Some of you will have just a few of these disruptions. Some of you are going to have all of these disruptions. So disruptions do require some critical decisions, and these are the kind of decisions that leaders need to make. We want to be able to pivot toward options that closely align with our mission. They're fundable, but they're also sustainable. And I'll give you an example of that. We've worked with camps at this time. You can imagine the kind of disruptions that camps had. How are you going to have camps when you can't bring people together? That's an example of sustainable. So in this part of the toolkit, you're going to chart your disruptions, just like you're seeing on this screen. You're going to estimate their impact, and knowing all of your disruptions, you're able to move to the next step, which is to understand which of your key mission activities are going to need to change. And we use in this next step, we call this the mission analyzer. So the mission analyzer is a time when you're going to ask these critical questions. What should we do more of? What should we do less of? And what must we stop doing, at least for now, or maybe even in the long term? So let's look at the mission analyzer part of the toolkit. This may be familiar to some of you. This is a very common exercise that organizations will go through to try to understand what are our strongest products and services, what are some that are fundable but may not be as strong, what are some that are very strong but not as fundable, and then, God forbid, quadrant 1, those that are neither fundable nor are the best products and services that we have. So we call this the mission analyzer. And when you're doing this for this kind of exercise we're talking about today, you're going to keep in mind what can we also do now. So this is where this analyzer is going to work. Now, we serve people in many sectors. Al mentioned that in the introduction. So your mission could include products and services. It may be nonprofit programs like the example of the camp that I gave. It may be education. You may be in the for-profit sector. We even have an organization that has organic chickens and eggs. And so we even serve people in the farming. So we call it a mission analyzer, but think of it in terms of your products and services. So why would you use this analyzer? Why wouldn't you just say, let's do what's easy? Well, we don't believe it makes sense to do across the board cuts. I can recall times in my career when top leadership would say, everyone is going to have their area cut 6%. There wasn't any strategic calculation as to which parts of this organization can thrive in this disruption, which aren't really thriving right now. Instead, it was just cut 6%. We don't believe that. we believe that you should understand the current successes and feasibility of your different mission activities, and then those are the ones that you should fund and support during this. Remember, as you do this, that even if something is feasible at this time, if it falls in quadrant 1, this would be a time to move the resources from there into one of the other 3 quadrants. And once that you've gone through this exercise of where's our financial picture, what are the disruptions we're facing and what do they keep us from doing, what are our strongest mission areas, then you're going to take a look at your people, because at this point it's going to start to impact people. So Al, take us to the talent area.
Well, and I wanted to say, Giselle, this is really insightful, because as we started to talk about this, I thought, well, we should just go right to talent. But Giselle, with her experience, said, no, we can't do that without knowing which areas of our organization we need to build. Possibly some areas in difficult times we need to build, some areas we need to, especially if there's low mission match and low revenue, that we need to cut back more so than other areas. And so that's why we start with this mission fit matrix. And then we can go on to talent. And, the 4th area of our assessment is people. And as you consider assessing people, here's where it gets challenging, because we all believe that people are the heartbeat of our organization. I mean, we're all friends. We work together. We've made great accomplishments together. We're a team. But this step is really an important one. It's a big one. This is where we have to translate the results of our financial and mission assessment to discern where we stay strong and where we might need to shrink, or even how that translates into our staffing relative to our people. So the first 3 assessments that Giselle has already talked about, the financial, the unique disruptions, the mission, that helps really make it much more clear about what we need to do in terms of people, including how deep and where we need to make decisions. This is a prayerful step. It really takes a lot of discernment and wisdom and before moving forward. So this is the people step. The assessment that we provide actually assumes that we want to retain our most productive and value-aligned team members, no matter what, especially those that fall in the quadrant 4 of the mission analyzer. And that's the one where we have the strongest products, services, or programs and the highest revenue. So we want to, make sure that our best people might be in those areas. And you make people decisions. And as you make people decisions, though, most likely you're going to find that you need to move your most agile people from areas that you're reducing to strengthening other areas. So please don't just make across the board cuts, as Giselle said earlier. That really is not helpful. Transferring talented people to areas, especially these talented people who are strong culture fits, to the best areas for them to contribute in is where we want to go. Now, as we look at the talent organizer, and as we're doing our debriefings with organizations and helping them with their culture, we often talk about doing talent assessments, having organizations know who are their top performers. And many times we've seen that organizations haven't gone through a discipline of identifying who their top performers are. And of course, this is a great time to do it using a tool like this. This toolkit that you receive, walks you through steps to fairly analyze your talent. Where are you, or when you are done with this exercise, you'll have a list of people to keep, possibly to transfer, or possibly transition out of the organization. And many of our partners use Excel files that we provide to guide this exercise. And again, with an Excel file, you can customize it to fit your situation. This is an important step beyond immediate impressions of people that you have and their performance. Doing a careful analysis, looking at this kind of factor by factor is important as you prepare to communicate the whys behind your decisions, because at the end, you're going to have to communicate. So how did you make these decisions? For example, you can see here that we have some common traits and competencies along the top of this chart of highly agile, of people that are highly agile and mission aligned. And as you work with the Excel file we provide, we encourage you to customize these criteria based on your own organization's values and other competencies. For example, we have here, we have makes great decisions, so that's right there in the center of the Excel file. Well, you might have your own criteria. So whatever your criteria are, feel free to put those in the tools. As you can see, we're just scratching the surface of these core processes, and we hope that this discussion at least helps you create a deepening awareness of the steps to effectively steward your mission and talent as we move forward. And as we thought about this, we thought about this as a talent exercise, but it really has to align with your mission and being a little bit strategic or very strategic about what you're going to do. So Giselle, what's next?
Well, I want to do another poll. So we have a lot of people on this call that are really experienced and have gone through exercises like this. So we'd like to know from your standpoint, which is the hardest for you to do? A, is it hardest for you and the people at your organization to assess your financial picture? Or B, is it assessing the disruptions that you're facing? Or C, is it assessing the effectiveness of your programs? Or D, assessing people for their competency and fit? So go ahead and Al, are you putting the poll up there?
How about
there
this?
There it is. Okay, so A, is it assessing your financial situation? Is it B, your disruptions you're facing? The programs or services, their quality, their fit, or is it assessing people? All right, this is fun looking at these answers. Okay, we got to 72%. Remember, we need statistical validity. Let's have a couple more answers and get into the 80% range. Okay, so far we have 37% feel that it is assessing people. 21% is assessing programs. 32% is assessing disruptions, and 11% is assessing your financial picture. I would have called it, I don't think I would have called the disruption one, realizing how difficult that part is. Now, we do have one ministry partner on the call that I worked with, her and her leadership team, to assess the disruptions in a facilitated workshop. And it actually took us 3 hours. So maybe you're right, those who answered the disruption, that was a challenging exercise. So great. All right. So Al, let's move on. Thanks, everybody. Let's look at parts 2 to 4 of the toolkit. So today, obviously, in just an hour, we cannot go through both of the toolkits that we have for you in all of the details. So we're just going to tell you what we've got in parts 2 through 4 of the toolkit. We went through a light touch through part 1, the assessment part. In parts 2 through 4, you're going to, in part 2, you're going to align your assessment decisions. And you'll see a picture here of what does that mean, align your assessment decisions? Well, you're going to go through a Q&A on your revenue expenses, your mission fit, and your people. And you're going to be forced to answer these questions that your folks are going to have about any changes you're proposing. Those of you who've gone through this, you know, people are going to ask questions. You're going to have questions from your staff, your board, the people that you serve. Why did you make these decisions? What was your basis? What were they intended to do? So you're able to align and make sure that you've basically had a sanity check and done what you intended to do. That's the align section. Then there's people care. There's going to be difficult decisions you're going to have to make about people. We guide you through best practices for making those difficult decisions, who to involve and how to do it. And often those will require laying people off, transferring people, sometimes promoting and demoting people. And then finally, acting on your decisions. When you get to the section 4 on ACT, we provide you with communication guides and planning guides, who to involve and how to get started. So part 4 of this, as we mentioned, was these action guides. And we know, Al, if you want to slip to that last slide there, we know you might be interested in the full toolkit. And so what we're going to do is we're going to send you an email, and you're going to have links to the toolkit, and it'll be this toolkit that you've seen a preview of, as well as another link to the Excel files where you can customize this for your own use. And you might ask, why in the world would you give away the toolkit? Well, part of it is that you probably know BCWI, we are a nonprofit organization, and you are our intended field for our mission. And so we really want you to flourish and thrive. And so that's why we're providing this to you. So we like to stop here and answer any questions that you've had. You can put them into the chat box if you haven't put them in there yet. And let's see what questions you have. Oh, that's beautiful. You know, Prajan, I thought of that too. I was like, we should have thought of having this workshop give HR credits. I would love that myself. I have an SPHR. I need credits myself, but we'll go through that. We have 3 more workshops to do, and we'll look into that and see if we can provide that. And also, I know that yesterday when we were working with a couple of other people about this, we did have a question about how long does it take to go through the toolkit that you just presented? And we would suggest that if you went through the full toolkit and you did all of the analyzers, that you'd probably want to set aside 2 days for your leadership to do that. The first day you would be assessing and spending all that time going through the 4 different areas. And then the second day would be more in the planning and implementation phase. What other questions do we have? 3. Okay, we've got one from Linda. It says, if you're going to make cuts in quadrant 1, what is a good transition for things in progress that employees worked on? Oh, isn't that a great question? So when I've had to go through this, that is one of the important things that you're going to work with the supervisor, is to understand what is this employee involved in. And in fact, in the toolkit, we give you questions to answer, especially if you're going to cut areas or lay off staff. What are all the things that you need to consider about the in progress? And so providing the employee maybe with a period of time to document and wrap up, as well as the supervisor making sure that those responsibilities are carried over in any services that you're providing. So we do have a section in the toolkit that goes over that. And then we have a question from Linda, Linda with a Y. Does the toolkit get into how people and talent are specifically coping through the disruptions? Yes, in the people care section of it, we have various questions that we have leaders consider and activities that we suggest they go into to make sure that they're supporting not only the people that may be transitioning, but all of the different people that are part of it. So it's not actually in the talent analyzer that you saw, but it is in the people care section. All right, we have a question from Sean. How do we consider revenue in the mission fit matrix as a church whose regular programs don't bring in revenue? Yes, so in the revenue analyzer section, that is more in the sense of, the first part that we went in, that's more in the sense of your financial status. When it comes to the programs, at a church, you have to weigh really heavy on participation and volunteer support. So as you know, Sean, at churches, the volunteer part of it is often takes the place of the revenue. So things that are heavily supported by volunteers and heavily attended, you would put more of a strategic emphasis in that.
And probably also the resources that you'd put into the program, relatively speaking, might be another way to look at it. Yeah.
Okay.
So, well, Giselle, I think we need to move forward.
Yeah, great. We had one question from Jay. Can BCWI provide assistance? And yes, we do provide assistance. You can contact us once you get it. If you feel like you need assistance to work through this, we do provide assistance. Okay, Al, let's go into the next toolkit, which is recovery.
Yeah, let's turn now to address those of you who have come through, and maybe you've already made cuts and reductions. Maybe you've already struggled through some of these critical decisions and now want to have a strong basis for recovering your mission impact and building your people. So for those of you who are still making decisions about reductions, we encourage you to pick up takeaways from this section that we're about to go through for a stronger recovery. So we're calling this the road back, and it's building engagement after disruptions. This is the second resource that we've introduced and are introducing to you today. The road back is what BCWI calls the road back to flourishing, where healthy culture and high engagement and strong mission impact are critical. Building back employee engagement in times of disruption, in times of crisis, or even a downturn can be one of the most challenging opportunities faced by leaders. As we've seen this over and over again, these times often follow budget and people cuts, the loss of key leaders, or even a failure to be able to deliver an organization's key programs and services. So while leaders normally understand that their role in modeling vision and mission and hope in turbulent times, they can also fuel unclear perceptions and practical steps that it takes to build trust. I mean, sometimes it's a difficult time for leaders to really focus, and so they don't really reinforce commitment and a belief in the organization's potential to kind of come back and thrive, and that's important. So here we provide advice to engage employees on how to join you on the road back to a healthy and even flourishing culture. Giselle, what are some of the challenges?
Yeah, so we talked about them in the first section, but some of the challenges that I would say probably 80% of you have faced are that you've had a loss of revenue, you've had budget cuts, probably some staff layoffs, and program and service reductions. What happens when that happens? Well, we are an institute and we've been gathering data, and we have actually very fresh data from hundreds of organizations that have taken engagement surveys in the last year during this very disruptive time. Here's what we found. We find that there's a lack of trust. that would be our key one. And that lack of trust is in leadership. And it's especially in leadership's ability to turn the course into a positive direction when they've seen all these kind of things happen at their organization. The second is a fear of job loss. So while they're still grieving the loss of their colleagues, the loss of programs that they've loved, they are afraid of their own job loss. There's confusion. There's new expectations for people. Sometimes jobs have been combined. Their job has changed. The organization has pivoted. They don't really know what they're supposed to be doing. They also have confusion about what the future holds. What is the vision? What is the strategy? Where are we going? And finally, they're discouraged. They've got a higher workload than they've had before in most cases. Their careers have been stalled, and their total compensation has been reduced over and over again. As we look at the results of engagement surveys, we see, we've had pay freezes, we've had retirement plan cuts, we've had increased amount that we have to pay into our health plans. Our vacation time has been reduced. So they've got a reduced total compensation package. This all rolls up into discouragement. So what do? Well, we've tried to make it easy for you in this toolkit. Let's go and do the same kind of process, but on a much lighter level for this road to recovery. So we suggest assess, build, care for people, and take action are your 4 steps. So let's start with assess. Assess is the first one. Might be getting tired of that word today, but trust me, you're going to want to do that. So I'm going to start out with a little tiny story in this section. And there's a book. I just love this book. It's by the Center for Creative Leadership. It's called Leading with oh boy, that's a hard one to say. Leading with Authenticity in Times of Transition. So here's what happens. The authors point out that leaders will make difficult, well thought out decisions for major change, and then they tend to quickly implement them and they move it forward. And in their minds, this change has happened. It's done. Staff, on the other hand, they frequently need space to understand, accept, embrace the change. And the authors go on to say that leaders will then communicate again. And they're frustrated. They're thinking that staff simply didn't hear them. Did they read the email? Did they watch the video? Do they just not understand what we're saying? Or worse, are they refusing to change? Well, not usually. Instead, what's happening is that they're struggling to integrate all of this change into their own thoughts, their own aspirations for the future, the preferences for their work, and then all the different routines that are changing. Staff is not ready. They have concerns, they need care, and they need understanding. So we encourage leaders to do a quality assessment of the staff health and their engagement. It's a gift indeed for leaders in critical times when you have lots of disruptions and change, because the mix that goes on with engagement is going to be different. And we've seen that hundreds of times as we look at the engagement surveys. We'll see the same result, and it's a completely different mix of engagement, strengths, weaknesses, etc. So first thing we do is we encourage you to do an assessment exercise. We've presented you 3 options, and obviously we've used the BCWI options that we give. The first is to do a full engagement survey, and that's what we call our BCWI engagement survey. If you've got a recent engagement survey, if it's less than 6 months old, then we encourage you to do a pulse survey, 16 questions, very good indicator of how things are, as well as which areas are strong and which areas are weak. And finally, you can do something internally that we call a listening tour, where a leader sits down and does a series of discovery groups and asks 4 important questions. We have all of these tools available. You can ask for them in advance. The listening tour tool is free, and then the other 2 have a fee. So the next step is called build, which is very similar to the last one. So now you've got an assessment, you've got fresh data about your people and culture, and then we recommend spending time like you did in the last toolkit and outlining the state of your mission and organization. So in step 2, you do a mini SWOT analysis. I know many of you are familiar with that. You look at your finances, your mission priorities, your people priorities, and this new fresh engagement data. This step helps you see each of your key areas and what are the priorities for the next steps, which helps you create strong plans and strong engagement. So Al, talk about the people, which is the 3rd step.
Yeah, thanks, Giselle. You know, as I mentioned earlier, the road back to a healthy culture requires strong levels of trust between leaders and staff. And we focus on this really as a primary thing. Disruptions and changes have likely reduced trust. We all know how that works. In addition, in 2021, you know, we see and forecasters estimate that there will be possibly very high voluntary turnover later this year. It'll be sort of a release valve after people have clung to their jobs during COVID. And we know that a focus on people will help, and engagement will help to reduce the possibility of losing your best people as things open up and the economy stabilizes. So be aware of this. You know, later this year, there's going to be more of a chance of turnover, voluntary turnover among your staff, and you of course want to keep your best people. So in this step, in the Road Back Toolkit, you know, we walk through 5 key leadership behaviors that will improve trust. And these behaviors include transparent communication, a bias towards inclusion, and inclusion is just a huge issue with the millennials in the workplace, showing that people matter, that also that they belong and are part of and belong to the organization, and they are valued. Each of these topics has really practical actions that leaders can build into an action plan. And you'll see one of them on the screen on the right-hand side here. So you see this picture of this possibly skeptical person. But if you've noticed this yourself, you know that during and after a turbulence, people need to know that their organization and their leaders care about them. People care builds loyalty. It builds commitment. It builds engagement. Leaders have seen remarkable results adopting these 5 actions as part of a strategy to move back on the road to a healthy and flourishing workplace. So in the last step, you'll plan your next actions for recovery and assess your readiness to act.
Yeah, so let's talk about step 4. And obviously, since you're on the road to recovery, you're on the road to growth, this is a shorter toolkit. And one of your questions may be, how long will we spend going through this? And we suggest a day, setting aside a day, that's probably a good amount of time. So in step 4, you're going to set strategic priority actions. And we've created a grid for you to be able to do this, to make sure that you've covered all 4 areas that you're going to analyze, and then you're able to make specific steps. So in building your plan, you can have, if you're really advanced, if you're right there near recovery, then you're going to probably want to build a quarterly plan to make some positive momentum. If you're earlier in the process, you can make this a 6 to 12 month plan. But the key is to create a well-rounded plan that takes all of your priorities into consideration. Ideally, the result of this part of the exercise is going to be impactful actions that resource and support the key mission initiatives, but they also engage your staff in meaningful work, and they're showing people that the mission is once again making a lot of impact to those you serve. You're going to obviously take into considerations the ramifications of existing disruptions, right? But at the same time, you're going to plan strategies that move the mission forward through creativity and innovation. Much of this you've already been doing. And what you want to do is to be sure to give staff goals that are challenging but achievable and are doable despite the disruptions, but they're taking into consideration the people that are involved. That is one core concern that we see as we talk to leaders, is they sometimes are making these decisions all by themselves, and they're not taking the people care into involvement. The people are the ones that are going to be following through. So today you've had a toolkit introduction. You've had one of the toolkits is for those of you that are earlier that still need to make a lot of cuts and adjustments. One is for those that want positive momentum, and what are the kind of things that fuel positive momentum. So in our last couple of minutes here, we'd like to know if you have any questions that you'd like us to answer as we wrap up. Let's look over at our chat box, Al.
Yeah, so please, we'd love to answer any additional questions that you might have and things that you've seen both in your organization as you recover and rebound from any disruptions in 2020. And, certainly we'd love to answer a couple of questions. I'll mention we've seen some interesting things here in COVID, and that is that leadership teams have taken decision making into the top leadership team conference room, and they've really stopped the process of listening to the front line. COVID has kind of shut down a lot of employee communication. So we'd encourage you to think about that as you move into recovery, to restore the possibility and the actions of having the front line involved in decisions that impact and making sure, kind of like as Giselle was talking about a leadership tour or a listening tour, to really get back to the front line, getting their input and acting on their decisions. So those are some of the things that we're seeing.
Yeah, Alan, I just want to amen Lena's comment. She said workload is a very big challenge in this process. In the toolkits, we do say to leaders that you must create goals that are attainable and aren't discouraging. We find that leaders are much more willing to make the cuts, but they're way less willing to reduce the goals. And so it's only fair and practical that you have to align your budget and your people with new goals, not just shift the work around. So yes, Lena, I completely agree with that. I think, Linda, that also gets to your point in overall fatigue in dealing with, quote, unprecedented times. We have to scale back our expectations, keep the people healthy, keep them well-resourced so that they can also grow and recover. Final question from Carrie as we wrap up. Have you seen tensions created around work from home and the need for teams to be physically present with one another? I think there is some tension, but what we have definitely seen is that if leaders are doing a very good job of having one-on-ones, team meetings, overall communication, that they've actually seen the communication area of their engagement survey improve. And in fact, what employees are saying is, we like working at home. A lot of them want to keep a work at home benefit, but we want that communication that's become stronger to continue. Please have more all staff meetings. Please have more two-way communication processes. So Al, I think we've come to the end of our time. If you just like to wrap up.
Yeah, well, please feel free to reach out and contact us if you have any questions. We'd love to answer those for you. And we'll be in touch with you about receiving these two toolkits that we've talked about today. And if you'd like to share this webinar with other leaders in your network, we'll provide a link to this webinar recording, as well as the resources that we've shown you today. So be looking for an email from BCWI soon, and thanks for participating.
Thanks, everyone.